What is the most dramatic country in history? Not in a bad way, not in a we did a war crime way, in a we've been through more than any soap opera screenwriter could dream up way. You might say France. Revolutions, beheadings, a short emperor with big feelings, collaborations, liberations, dramatic, yes, but France always stayed France. You might say China. Dynasties collapsing, peasant uprisings every 300 years, famines so big they got named. Tragic, sure, but China always stayed on the map. No, no, no. The most dramatically, historically, geographically, politically, existentially chaotic country in Europe, maybe in the world, is Poland. Yes, Poland, the country of pierogies and Pope John Paul II, the country that has been partitioned, erased, redrawn, invaded, occupied, liberated, reoccupied, and somehow is still here, still making pierogies, still being Poland. This is the story of how that happened. Before Poland was Poland, it was a collection of West Slavic tribes hanging around the Vistula River doing tribe things. Farming, feuding, probably arguing about whose turn it was to guard the grain. The dominant group was called the Polans. Yes, that's where Poland comes from, and they were ruled by a dynasty called the Piasts. By the 900s, they had a leader named Mieszko I. Smart guy, ambitious guy. Looked around at the neighborhood and noticed something. Everyone powerful in Europe was Christian, and everyone not Christian was getting Christianized with a sword whether they liked it or not. So, in 966 AD, Mieszko did something unprecedented. He chose to get baptized before anyone could drag him to the baptismal font themselves. He married a Bohemian Christian princess, converted the whole kingdom, and sent a letter to the Pope basically saying, "Hey, we exist, we're Christian, please acknowledge us." This was not religious devotion, this was geopolitical genius, because now Poland is on the map, officially, spiritually, diplomatically. Ladies and gentlemen, Poland has entered the chat. Fast forward through a few generations of Piast kings arguing, splitting the kingdom between brothers because apparently nobody in medieval Europe ever heard of a will lawyer, and eventually reuniting it again, and you get to the 1300s. By 1320, a stubborn little king named Władysław the Elbow High, yes, that was genuinely his nickname because he was short, finally reunited the fragmented Polish duchies and got himself crowned King of Poland. Historians call this the Restoration. We call it Poland's first comeback. Then his son Casimir the Great shows up and things get genuinely exciting. Casimir expands the borders, builds castles, founds universities, codifies the laws, and is famously described as having found Poland built of wood and left it built of stone. He also, interestingly, was extremely friendly toward Jewish communities fleeing persecution across Europe, offering legal protections that were basically unheard of at the time. Poland becomes a real functioning state. Then, in 1385, something bizarre and wonderful happens. Poland, facing a succession crisis with no king, essentially does a diplomatic blind date with Lithuania. The deal, Lithuanian Grand Duke Jogaila converts to Christianity, marries the Polish Queen Jadwiga, who is 11, which is a whole other conversation about medieval norms, and merges Poland with Lithuania. The result? The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, one of the largest states in Europe, stretching from the Baltic Sea almost to the Black Sea, bigger than France, richer than England, and for once in Polish history, the neighbors are the ones being nervous. This lasts about 200 years, which by Polish standards is basically an eternity. Here is the thing about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. It had a parliament, the same, full of powerful nobles called the Szlachta, and the Szlachta had rights, so many rights, embarrassingly many rights. In 1505, they passed a law that basically said the king can't make any new laws without the nobility's approval. Cool, checks and balances, very progressive. In 1573, they decided, actually, the nobility should elect the king every single time. No hereditary throne, just a big noble vote every generation. And then, brace yourself, in 1652, they introduced the Liberum Veto, a rule that said if even one member of parliament objected to anything, the entire session was dissolved. One guy, one vote, everything stops. Imagine you're in a meeting with 100 people and any single one of them can just stand up, say, "I object," and everyone goes home and nothing gets done. Now imagine foreign powers, Russia, Prussia, Austria, start bribing individual Polish nobles to use the veto to paralyze the government. That is what happened. Poland, from the inside, started voting itself into dysfunction. The Commonwealth that once made Europe nervous became the political equivalent of a very large, very confused dog that keeps tripping over its own legs. It's 1655. Poland is already dealing with Cossack uprisings in the east, Russian pressure on the borders, and general noble chaos at home. Then, Sweden, which at this point was basically the most aggressive country in Europe, looks at Poland and thinks, free real estate. The Swedish invasion, which the Poles call the Deluge, was not a war, it was a catastrophe. Swedish forces swept through the country so fast that most Polish nobles just surrendered and switched sides, because why not? Warsaw fell, Krakow fell, King Jan Casimir fled to Silesia. Poland, as a functioning state, basically ceased to exist for a few years. The population dropped by roughly a third, cities burned, monasteries looted, the economy collapsed. It took decades to even partially recover. And here's the thing, Poland did recover. Barely, slowly, but it did. The Swedes eventually left, the king returned, the Commonwealth limped forward. But the damage was done. The deluge broke something. Not the country, not yet, but the confidence, the momentum. Poland went from a great power to a great power that used to be great, and its neighbors noticed.
Back to Poland. It's 1918. World War I just ended. The German Empire collapsed. The Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed. The Russian Empire collapsed. All three empires that ate Poland in 1795 have ceased to exist within the same year. If you were a Polish person in 1918, this felt like the universe finally reading its emails. Józef Pilsudski, soldier, revolutionary, man of extraordinary mustache, marched into Warsaw and declared Polish independence on November 11, 1918, the same day as the armistice, like he planned it. Poland was back. The borders were a mess. The economy was a wreck. 3 different legal systems, 3 different currencies, 3 different railway gauges from 3 different empires all had to be merged into one country. And Poland also immediately had to fight a war against Bolshevik Russia, which in 1920 tried to push westward through Poland to spread revolution into Western Europe. Poland won. Against all odds, in the Battle of Warsaw, called by some historians the Miracle on the Vistula, Polish forces stopped the Red Army cold. Winston Churchill called it one of the most decisive battles in European history. Poland rebuilt. Through the 1920s and 30s, a real country emerged. Cities, universities, infrastructure, an army, a culture, a future. And then, 1939 happened. On September 1, 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland from the west. On September 17th, the Soviet Union invaded from the east. The British and French, who had promised to defend Poland, did essentially nothing. Poland fell in 5 weeks. What followed was the worst occupation in European history. The Nazis didn't just want Poland's territory, they wanted Poland gone. Polish intelligentsia, professors, priests, officers, rounded up and shot in the first weeks. The Jewish population, which had lived in Poland for centuries and made up one of the largest Jewish communities in the world, was systematically murdered in a genocide that took 3 million Polish Jewish lives. Another 3 million non-Jewish Poles were killed, worked to death, executed, starved, bombed. Warsaw was reduced to rubble, twice actually, once in 1943 when the Jewish ghetto rose up, and once in 1944 when the broader Warsaw Uprising, the largest resistance operation of the entire war, was crushed after 63 days of fighting with no Allied support. By 1945, 1 in 5 Polish citizens was dead. The country was physically destroyed, and then the Soviets, who liberated Poland, decided to stay. Poland, after World War II, was technically free and technically a country again, but it had a Soviet-installed government, Soviet troops, Soviet censorship, and a Soviet plan for everything, including what newspapers said and what history books taught. The communists renamed streets, they rewrote textbooks, they arrested political opponents, they collectivized farms, they built gray concrete blocks of flats that looked exactly as depressing as they sound. But here's the thing. It was still Poland. Polish was still spoken. The Catholic Church, which the communists deeply mistrusted and never fully managed to suppress, remained a center of cultural and national identity. Underground literature circulated, jokes about the regime spread, the famous Radio Free Europe broadcast in Polish to millions of listeners who gathered around shortwave radios to hear news their own government wouldn't tell them. And then, in 1978, a Polish cardinal named Karol Wojtyła was elected pope. Poland became the home country of the leader of the world's largest religion. You cannot overstate what this did to Polish national confidence. 2 years later, in 1980, workers at the Gdansk shipyard went on strike. Their leader was an electrician named Lech Wałęsa. The movement they founded was called Solidarity, Solidarność. Within months, 10 million Poles had joined. 10 million out of a country of 35 million. It was the largest trade union in history. Martial law came down in 1981. Solidarity was banned. Leaders were arrested, but it didn't die. It went underground. It kept printing. It kept organizing. And then in 1989, when the Soviet bloc began to collapse, Poland was first. Free elections in June 1989 gave Solidarity a landslide victory. By the end of the year, the communist government was gone. Poland, for the first time in 50 years, chose its own leaders. Poland in 2025 is a member of NATO and the European Union. It has one of the strongest economies in Central Europe. Warsaw, which was 85% destroyed in World War II and rebuilt from rubble, is a modern, thriving capital with skyscrapers and tram lines and very good coffee. Polish is spoken by 45 million people worldwide. Polish engineers, scientists, artists, and writers contribute to the world in ways that would have seemed unthinkable to those children hiding Polish books under their floorboards in 1870. It has not been perfect. Polish politics have been turbulent. Controversies over judicial independence and press freedom have tested its democratic institutions. The debate over Poland's relationship with its own history, including its role in the Holocaust, is ongoing and painful and necessary. But the country exists, on the map, in the EU, in NATO, with a constitution, a parliament, a president, a national football team with complicated feelings about qualifying for tournaments, and enough pierogies to feed the entire continent.
Poland was erased from the map in 1795 and came back in 1918. It was destroyed in 1939 and came back in 1945. It was occupied in 1945 and came back in 1989. Every single power that tried to erase Poland, the Prussian Empire, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, is gone. All of them, consigned to history books and dusty museums and the former empires section of Wikipedia. Poland is still here. There is something important in that. Not triumphant, not simple, history is never simple, but something real.
Identity, it turns out, is harder to erase than borders. Language is harder to kill than institutions. People, when they decide who they are and refuse to stop deciding it, are more durable than the empires that try to tell them otherwise. Poland is not just a place, it is an argument. A very long, very stubborn argument made by millions of people across hundreds of years that says, we exist, we have always existed, and we will continue to exist. And so far, they're winning. Checkmate to everyone else.